Hi, friends. Welcome to the Anime Book Club podcast. I'm your host, DJ Montague.
And I'm your host, Greg. And here we review anime from classics to brand new stuff, hidden gems, and controversial favorites.
You'll hear all of our hot takes, rants,
and genius observations. So thanks for tuning in, and buckle up because the episode starts now.
By the way, friends, these episodes contain spoilers, so be careful and don't ruin this anime for yourself. You've been warned.
Hello. Welcome.
Nice. Perfect.
Everyone, to the Anime Book Club.
God damn it, Greg.
This is a bi-weekly.
You can start over whenever you feel like.
Nope, this is staying in. So this is a bi-weekly podcast where we watch and discuss all types of anime together.
Yeah.
This is Japan Edition number 2. I am your host, Greg, in Japan, Large Jesus. And I'm here with my friend, Third Degree Burn Hand.
Completely burned all over my face and body, hands everywhere.
Yeah, actually, he burned his hand off. He no longer has a hand.
Right. Hi, I'm the Joker, also known as DJ Montague. This is my origin story now.
Yeah.
I was cooking a pot pie, and now I'm the Joker.
I think that's how it went in Batman as well.
Yeah,
I
it was
think
really
he was cooking, and he burned his hand, and then he blew up a hospital, I think.
That's exactly how it went. Welcome, friends. Thank you for being here with us today. Hope you are enjoying all the wonderful festivities that are life. Today, we're going to talk about Jobless Reincarnation Season 1. Greg, how are you feeling, first of all, about being in Japan and seeing all these really cool Jobless figurines, and then 2, feeling about the show as a whole?
I haven't seen any Jobless figurines in the Crane games. That's been my main focus, doing the whole Crane game thing and wasting all of my money. Where I could just buy these figurines for, a fraction of what I actually paid to win them.
Technically, I feel like you've been doing okay. It's like $20 a pop.
It is probably more financially responsible to purchase them with normal money.
Okay.
But I think that's not the whole point of it. The whole point is the dopamine hit. I got to get the win. I don't care what I win as long as I'm winning. The other day I was working on one, and apparently I was just doing so awful that the worker came up to me and was like, "Hey, do you want me to help you?" And I was like, "Yes, please. Please help me." Not with the game, but just with the decisions in my life. Please help.
Just up to this point, could you direct me, please? Crane game person.
But yeah, he readjusted the prize, and he was like, "Okay, you want to try and grab here, and then that'll pull this corner out, which will move the box this way." So it's more of a puzzle than a Crane game. So when you go to the game centers and you actually indulge in the black arts of Crane games, you have to go in the expectation that you're not going to win it on the first try, the second try, or the third try. Like there's some times when like it can happen, and when it does, it's you basically hit the lottery.
In the Crane games that we have, when we have like the arcade called Round 1 that we have gone to a few times, they have a bunch of Crane games, and it's very similar to the Japanese style where they're all very similar exterior, and then they have like the different kinds, the rings, the weights, the one where you have to push it to one side where like it's like a V shape where the item is like on one side of the V that's like easy to balance, and you have to put it into the middle. Like there's all those different kinds, and they're awesome.
So Round 1 is a huge game center.
Oh wow.
And it's the same in the US where they have bowling, they have darts, they have all sorts of games. It's not just Crane games. I got to look it up. I don't know if it was like originally Japanese and then it came over to America. And then you have the Sega ones, which were rebranded to Gigo. and then you have the Namco buildings, and then you have the Taito buildings, and those are like 4 major ones. And then you have little mom and pop crane game shops as well, kind of scattered all over the place.
That's kind of awesome, though. I like that. I know that it's, in general, it's like gacha is predatory inherently because, you know, but I'd rather it be a physical thing rather than a video game thing. You know what I mean? Like gacha in video games, I think is pretty negative, but like gacha in a physical sense, like the gambling and all that stuff, it's not super great either, but I think it's the lesser of two evil for sure.
Yeah, now that you bring up video games, like video games now where, you know, you don't necessarily own the physical copy of the game anymore. You own a digital copy, and then Ubisoft decides, yep, we just want to shut down these servers because not enough people play and it's just costing us too much money. They can just turn them off, and then now the game that you purchased is just useless.
And all the money that you spent on it.
Yeah, it's not even a paperweight. It's not even, you can't even set it on your desk and just remember times that once were.
It sits in your Steam library.
Gone. Yeah, it just takes up storage, and then you just don't want to delete it, because if you delete it, you can never reinstall it because the game's dead. So yeah, at least you get a physical item when you do it.
True.
And I guess the value is in the eye of the beholder, because, you know, if you look at that figurine and you're like, yeah, that's cool, I'm glad I got that.
And I remember a happy time getting that. That was fun for me. That's, you know, memories are, you can take that to the bank, right? You can buy a house with memories, probably.
Yeah, that's what I do. They're just like, yeah, you need like, you know, $600,000 in memories.
Yeah.
You can have this house.
Yeah. Sick.
It's kind of like League of Legends for me, the crane games, because
I
get there and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to queue up, solo queue, and I'm going to try to rank up. You know, it's going to be a great time. We're going to win. I'm going to get like 3 wins in a row.
Right.
Everything's going to be great. I'm not going to have a dude AFK or some dude just feed, you know, if you accidentally last hit his mob or whatever.
Right.
But then once you get in the game, you just internally, your rage meter just continues to build.
Yeah.
After like the 1,500 yen you put into that machine, and then that box just continues to not fall down.
Yeah.
Yeah, you internally get angry, and then you get the ultimate release when you actually get it. And it only lasts for about 30 seconds until you realize, like, holy shit, how much
what have I done?
And then I put it in a bag and just pretend that never happened. Healthy way to live life, I think.
Yeah, and that's basically like a League of Legends game complete. You know, you get the 30 seconds of happiness when the Nexus explodes, or Nexus explodes, and you're released from the torment and the kidnapping, the e-kidnapping that has happened to your mind and body.
It's not a release when you lose, because then now it's a sunk cost fallacy.
Yeah.
Because now you're like, well, I lost one. I can't stop playing.
I can't end on an L.
And then when you win, you're like, I'm on a win streak. I can't stop.
I can't stop now. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. This all sounds great.
So anyway, I haven't seen any jobless figurines in the cranes, but I have gone to a few figurine shops, and they have anything you can think of. I ran into, well, not in a bad way. I guess it's up to you to define bad, but
gotcha.
Some of them are just out of this world, where Fate Stay Night Saber is $1,000 for a certain version.
Yeah.
1/7 scale Saber figurine. And I don't think I'm like to that point in my figurine journey yet to blow $1,000 to $2,000 on a figure.
I feel that. Well, so how are you feeling about Jobless Season 1 as a whole so far?
I liked it. I liked the journey of Rudy. I feel like it deals with a lot of real life issues that us as human beings deal with on like a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
You have bullying, you have depression, you have anxiety, you have so many real life issues that are relatable.
Mm-hmm.
In that regard, I think Jobless is a really good anime, and you basically go on this journey with Rudy, conquering kind of all of these hurdles.
I wrote down in my notes that I think that season 1 is really good, and that this anime could possibly have helped some people not be like the shut-ins that they could have potentially become. You know, the decisions in the world are difficult to make to be active in current society. It's really hard. We are like disconnected more than ever, but still connected through the internet. And so you see this like evolution of this person who was in our world as connected as you could possibly be, but as disconnected as he possibly could handle. And you see the transfer of that person into like a functioning adult in this kid's body. You know what I mean? And I think it's a really, the story lends itself well to a person just that is that recluse in normal day-to-day life.
You get to see the contrast between real Rudy being bullied, like not having a job, not feeling good enough,
right,
trying to cope. Because yeah, I mean, what he did, he basically just shut himself in, played fighting games all day, ate prepackaged food, and just to try and be able to cope with all of the hurdles that life threw at him.
Yeah.
And throughout the growth of the character, he realized that probably wasn't the best path to take to handle those issues. So now he pretty much gets that second chance of take a different path and face these challenges head on. And obviously he has difficulty overcoming the challenges, but he does continue to put his mind to it. He does accept the challenges even though it's uncomfortable, and ends up being a better person in the long run. That's something that people in real life struggle with.
Absolutely.
Right? Like I've seen people where now with the advent of Uber Eats and DoorDash and that sort of stuff, like you almost don't even need to talk to anyone anymore. You can just put in the order online, have someone just drop it off at your door. Yep. You could watch them through the peephole, and after they get far enough away, I can crack my door open and just kind of slide my food into my house.
Right.
Rudy was like that, more or less. And then, he's kind of grown where it's uncomfortable to talk to people, but he overcame that, and now he pretty much unlocked new experiences and new adventures that he can go on as a person and realize like, hey, you know what? Life and stuff isn't necessarily so bad, and I shouldn't try to push it away.
Right.
To try to embrace these challenges a little bit more, because I think the reward for challenging yourself is greater than staying as comfortable as possible.
Yes, absolutely. And he also got to touch a boob, which he didn't do that before. So that's like enough of a bonus that I'm pretty sure that he would have done it if he had known that he got to touch a boob. So
yeah, he got to do a lot of stuff with boobs. He got to suckle boobs while he was a baby.
Yeah,
he got to touch boobs.
Yeah, but that's his mom. Don't make it weird.
Yeah, well, there's still boobs, and then he got to pants a girl. I've never pantsed a girl like that before in my life.
For the best.
All these experiences he missed out on. Really, really great. So if you go outside, this is what you get to do. You get to suckle and pants the opposite sex.
Maybe don't listen to what Greg just said. So we'll get into the little spoiler portion of our recap. First and foremost, I think that this season was, I'm going to say 95% of it was super well done, and I had a great time. And then there was 5% of it where I was like, why does this need to exist in the show? It doesn't. I don't feel like it progresses the storyline, but as we go along, we'll get into it. Starting off with episode 1. We're going to go through all 23 episodes of season 1. So this is kind of going to be probably a decently long episode. So buckle in, motherfucker. But see, episode 1, you're introduced to Rudy. You're introduced to this character that is a shut-in in the current life, the earth that we're on, the viewer is on. And you watch him exist and struggle a little bit. You kind of get like a montage of just like his life sucking balls. And then you watch him play Guilty Gear for a second, which was tight. Shout out to Guilty Gear. And then you get the experience of him being reborn as Rudy, and then learning sword fighting from his dad, and then learning magic from his mom, and being awesome. And then they seem like awesome parents to start off this show. I think they do one thing, and I think this is an overarching thing that happens over the course of the entire show that I've seen so far, is that they do an incredible job of talking about absolutely nothing and making it interesting enough that you're like, okay, you know, like I'm just here for this. This is kind of cool. Like there aren't a lot of shows that you watch where like you watch a baby grow up and you're like, oh, it's pretty good. I liked that. You know what I mean? Like, isn't that kind of a weird scenario?
It is, but I think they're setting the foundation of the whole theme of growth. I think that's why they kind of do it. It's like, yeah, I mean, as you know, he has to start completely over. So, like, as a baby, it's like, what do you do as a baby? You just eat and poop your pants. That's pretty much like what a baby does. But you know, we get the internal monologue of Rudy while he's a baby, where he's a grown man mentally, but he kind of has to literally start from scratch, literally poop his own pants, literally kind of walk around, learn how to walk again. Normal baby stuff where when you first learn to walk, you're just running around and it's like, oops, I have no coordination. I hit my head on a coffee table. So he goes through all of that. And to touch on his real life death before he got reincarnated, he was going to the convenience store and he was crossing a crosswalk, and then he saw like a group of younger kids, and then the truck barreling down uncontrollably down this rainy, windy road. I think at the time he was wearing his Kim Kardashian tracksuit to the going to the the Family Mart or wherever the hell he was going,
whatever convenience was nearby.
And he doesn't have shoes for some reason. I don't know why. And then it still kind of showed he did have that desire, like, not to be a piece of shit.
Yeah.
Because he did see the danger that the kids were in. Even though he's a shut-in, it's very hard for him to like interact with strangers. Like he still did try, and you did see that glimmer of hope within his old real life self.
Yeah.
So he more or less sacrificed himself for these kids that are crossing the street so they didn't die, and he died instead.
Yeah.
All of that is like a really nice setup in terms of storytelling, where you see just that very small glint of maybe something more in this person's life. And then he gets hit by the truck and he becomes a baby. And then now he has to go through the entire growth process from age 0 to however old he is now.
Yeah.
And in season 1, you are introduced to his dad, Paul, and his mom, Zenith. And yeah, as like a young couple, I would say, more or less it depicts real life, because yeah, I'm sure when you're a young couple with a young baby, yeah, you're still banging and you're not worrying about, scarring the baby at all, because the baby's a baby and they're not going to remember. And they're probably not going to remember their parents banging. As the viewers being adults, and as Rudy being adult in his brain, he's just like, hey, yo, I get to watch these people bang. But in terms of relaying the experience,
obviously,
it was weird. But in terms of relaying the experience, I think that's more or less accurate in real life. And Paul is, he's kind of like
he's a jock.
He like the captain of the football team, and he wants to teach Rudy how to sword fight, but then Rudy has a
innate ability
he's
for casting,
innately better at casting. But Paul is kind of like the overbearing dad, where he's like, yeah, you're a man, you should swing a sword because that's what men do, and that's what I do, so I want my son to follow in my footsteps.
My favorite thing about Paul is the thought process, not the thought process, but the idea that he is just somehow two hands that hold a sword attached to a junk. That's literally him going through life. It's like, do you want to fuck or fight? I'm figuring it out as I go, and it's either one of them. That's it.
He only has 2 speeds. It's either swing a sword or swing his other sword. Those are the 2 speeds that Paul runs at.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think some of us can relate to that, where like your parents want to put you into soccer or put you into baseball or gymnastics, and you don't necessarily want to, but at the same time you're a kid and you're like, I don't know, I guess I'll give it a shot.
Yeah.
And to Rudy's credit, he does. And he does know basic swordsmanship, and he's not the best. There's definitely people way better than him. So he kind of moves towards his strengths, but it's still good that he knows how to handle a sword. Again, to go with the whole putting yourself in uncomfortable positions and growing as an individual. You don't necessarily need to be the best cook or the best mechanic, but knowing how to change a tire and knowing how to cook some food are just good basic skills to have.
Yeah, it's going to help. It's going to help in the long run. He does an awesome job making himself look like he peed his pants in the first episode on accident by being good at magic. The monologue that he has with himself and the dialogue that Rudy has with himself as he's grown up, you go from seeing him at like 0 years old, like 2 months old, as a total baby, to learning to walk a little bit. And this is all happening in the first episode. You're introduced to this character, and it is like a true montage of the first 5 to 6 years of his life. And you learn about the world in minor ways that are like throwaway comments almost, that I wrote down some stuff that really was interesting to me, because when you are world building, when you have restrictions on the characters in the world, you can then have them bend or break these restrictions, and they're meaningful. You have these characters, and they say, like, more so than anything at birth, you're assigned how strong you will ever become. Your potential is there, but it's like you always have a ceiling. And I don't personally believe that. Like, I think that people can grow in massive scales depending on what they apply themselves to based on, their own wants and needs, right? But this world has that restriction, and they have a restriction on magic and how casting incantationless magic is considered genius level. And so Rudy at 5 years old can just produce magic, and that's considered insane. And he finds out very quickly that he needs to not ever do that, like in public, because it is incredibly, and they touch on it every time he does cast something in public and somebody sees that it's incantationless magic, somebody says something. I think they do a great job of this world building with this.
The world building you're talking about, and why I think this anime is so good, is because it's not just constant fighting. You can't always be fighting. Not every minute of the day is literally I walk in the subway and I have to fight a guy.
Wait a second. Did you just make a Jujutsu Kaisen reference? That
No,
city
of
was
course-
getting wrecked, okay?
Of course not. I'm not referencing that at all. But it doesn't, like, life isn't always about fighting. Punching through walls and doing all of that stuff is cool. But it's kind of like being like a musician. Because a lot of the time, like when you go to a concert or something, you get to see the final product. You get to see the culmination of all of their hard work.
Yeah.
And you don't, you're not there with them as they do scales for like 8 hours a day, all the boring shit.
Literally, you're explaining DJing right now, where people are like, do you just press buttons on a computer? And it's like, obviously,
Even taking the fighting example, like UFC, like you're not watching those guys punch a punching bag 8 hours a day, every day.
Right.
You're watching the pay-per-view UFC fight, and then you just get to see like the spin kick, flying knee, and you're just like, holy shit, that's awesome. I want a spin kick flying knee.
Right. Of course.
Without kind of realizing like what it takes to be able to do something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in terms of world building for this anime, they do a good job of showing you both sides of what it takes to actually get to where you want to be. And then once you get to where you want to be, how cool it is.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's even in the baseline spellcasting that Rudy kind of does, you could see the applications of how cool that actually would be into the world. Like, obviously he's incredibly powerful, but if you could use like incantationless magic to create water, you could change the entire world. That's an insane thing to think about in our current society. And then he's going into it as the person from our world, learning that, and then learning how he has to restrict that. It's like an overwhelming thought, and they do a good job of diluting it down to its basics and then letting you experience it and think for yourself on what the possible implications could be of this thing. And you get into episode 2, and you kind of get more of that return to our world's version of Rudy, where you're seeing like the depths of his depravity. You don't like start off by feeling sorry for Rudy all that much, because you just watched an episode of him doing cool shit and hanging out with like his mom and the maid, because his life is really nice here. And then you go backwards and you see kind of the stuff that he came from, the real world version of him, where he's a shut-in and all he's doing is playing Guilty Gear. And he has no friends. He misses his parents' funeral because he's jamming his bacon to fucking toilet stuff. And you're like, dude, what the fuck am I watching? I mean, obviously, it doesn't get as graphic as the way I explained it, but it's like
it's still pretty graphic. Like, I mean, it's what you would expect a dude jerking off would look like. It's literally he's just sitting in, like, there's no lights on.
Right.
The only light is from his screen of like a toilet cam, and he's just like sweating because he's going so hard. All of the stereotypical stuff you would imagine. It's like, yeah, I mean, that's pretty accurate. I think I think a pretty good depiction of what that action more or less looks like. You get to see him in his like, that's what he's comfortable with. That's what he feels like he's good at, which I guess is like jerking off, and that's what he's really focusing on.
Right.
And again, this is another like actual real world thing that happens, because the access to toilet cams and the hub and all of these things are real. And I feel like, kind of like a lot of people they're able to kind of get that quote unquote reward like very easy now. Like it's literally like 12 letters on a keyboard, and then you're in this world where you can just jerk off for days on end if you want to.
It's a whole different thing. I mean, you and I, as kids, the internet didn't exist like it does today. And so the instant access to so much information, while it is inherently used for good, because that's what most people are using the internet for, is to gain information or exchange information. That's great. But it's become more and more of that part of the internet where the degeneracy can take over easily, and the access to it is so readily available. Like, how do you combat that with a mind growing up in that world? One of the other things they do with Rudy, they show, real world Rudy, that he's getting bullied at school, and it gives you another reason for why he becomes this shut-in. And you get more of that sympathy of like, yeah, he got the shit beaten out of him at school his entire life. He didn't know what it was like stand up to people in a normal way and have the confidence in himself to be like a functioning member of the society that he's brought up in. And so to counteract that, he has to protect himself. And he does that by becoming a shut-in. You have this other Rudy, this other world that you're experiencing through his eyes for the first time. A 5-year-old kid. And he is also just like having a fucking ball, looking at like casting magic and like living in this world that's like his parents are just having a good time. The maid's like hanging out on the other side of the wall having a good time. It's a weird fucking beginning, but it's like you get a second chance. What are you going to do? Sit in a fucking room again? You know what I mean? It's like, it's very interesting.
How he got bullied was pretty, like, I have never experienced bullying to that level where someone literally tied me to a gate.
Yeah.
And pantsed me in front of like the entire world.
Not just pantsed him, but full butt ass naked and beat the ever loving shit
straight up naked.
Yeah.
And then everyone just points directly at his wiener and laughs. Like I've never had that happen in my life, and I can imagine how traumatizing something like that.
Oh, dude, I'd never go outside.
At that point, it's like, well, number one, like, where are the fucking teachers? Like, how could you get an entire mob to tie a kid to a gate and no one notices? And then even after he's tied to the gate and everyone's pointing at his wiener and laughing, no adult is around to come like break up this weird ass
50-year-old lady with a flip phone just walks by and she laughs too, and then fucking
like everyone laughs, right? Like like the president flies down on Air Force One to come laugh too. It's just like, what is going on?
They have to set the tone when you have like, I mean, that's sexual assault to a degree that I don't think you would ever really like. It's satirical almost, because like you don't see that in the normal world. But it's not like it's like the writer is like, I don't know. I don't feel like the writer's making like a big mistake with that. I think it's just silly that it's like the absurdity of it. But you have to sit with that character for a moment and realize like, okay, this is probably a harrowing experience that I would wish on 0 people.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And they do have a theme of like jerking off because in the new world,
Mm-hmm.
Rudy gets a magic teacher. Zenith realized that Rudy has an aptitude for magic.
Yeah.
Enter Roxy, which is his magic teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And they have the different races. So Roxy is actually
Midgardian.
what yeah. She's from the demon continent.
Mm-hmm.
So she comes over and then she teaches Rudy magic. And then she's kind of like a live-in tutor. So
Mm-hmm.
she's living in the house with them and she teaches him like every day. And with Paul and Zenith just like crushing it every single night.
Just slamming.
Roxy is just like, hey, I'll just kind of
I'll take a
listen on the other side. And real life story. I think in people's minds, like that idea is cool. It's like, oh, 2 people are banging. Like,
I don't think
my curiosity is piqued, and I can't control myself because I've had apartments with thin ass walls,
mm-hmm.
and I'm laying in bed, and I can literally hear like the people in the next apartment just like straight crushing. They have 0 shame.
Yeah.
They're just like yelling as loud as they can.
Yeah.
And the last thing on my mind was, well, I guess I should just fucking take it out and start going.
Yeah, no, exactly. I don't know, like, it might be an upbringing thing, it might be an American thing, but like that kind of voyeurism has just never been like something I've ever been. I'm like, ew, no.
Yeah,
God.
like me personally, it's kind of like, dude, this is weird as shit.
Yeah.
To sit here and just listen to these 2 people like crush against my will because I'm just laying in bed and it's like I can't control how thick like walls are. It's like, yeah, I mean, they didn't even have like AirPods at that time.
Right.
So it's not like I could put in my AirPods noise canceling mode and just like try to go to sleep. It's like, well,
put a pillow over my head, hope for the best.
Yeah. There's like nothing you can do. You're an unfortunate third party that is along for the ride that you didn't buy a ticket for, and you just kind of have to accept it. But the last thing on my mind was, well, I'm going to do it too.
Yeah. And so they kind of start doing a little more world building up. And this is one of those things like that I said earlier that is like a mistake. It is world building to a certain extent with them talking about the sexualization of this world. But I think it's something that can kind of go more unsaid than said, because I think it detracts from the awesomeness that is the true storyline of the show. I think there are so many other cooler storylines happening at any given time that it's like you can have a moment of banging, but not everybody needs to go down the depravity hole as hard. And it doesn't need to be shown as much. But that's me coming from the world that I live in and the upbringing that I've been through. So I guess like I'm not exactly the target audience for that again. But either way, they get back into a lot of the storyline and where they kind of go with Roxy explaining to Rudy about the world that he hasn't seen. He's existed only in this small house in this world that seems like the safest haven ever. He's got these powerful parents. He's got a maid. He has the cushest life. They got him a live-in tutor. And she's like, dude, there's demons. There's these things called superd. And then the world is incredibly racist outside of here. Grow the fuck up. There was a war 500 years ago that we're all still dealing with, the Lapless War between humans and demons. And it's just, that kind of, here in episode 2, normally with most shonen anime, you're kind of getting into knowing who the villains are of the world. With Naruto, you had the antagonists were other kids in the school. With like Jujutsu Kaisen, you had already been established to the arc villain, which lives inside of the main character. With the show, you're on the slow burn. You're still learning about the world and growing with Rudy. I really, really like that they're taking, because that's a risk. Like that's an inherent risk that you're not immediately trying to grip the audience and assuming that they're going to be intelligent enough to take a long journey with you. And that is a hard thing, especially with like storytelling these days. On his 5th birthday, he gets a lot of presents, right? He gets a sword, a wand, and a book. The book is given to him from Zenith, and the wand was given from Roxy, and the sword was from his dad.
That's correct. And I can barely remember being 5 years old, but I'm pretty sure I didn't get a sword, a wand, and a book. Like
100%
a
sure I
crash
didn't.
test dummy. Yeah, I got a crash test dummy, and maybe we got a cake from Costco. I
Was
think
that
maybe
was that pop
that was
culture
what
at
we
the
did.
time? Was the crash test dummies? Man,
Yeah.
Greg, we're
Crash
fucked.
test dummies and yeah, probably anyone that's younger than us don't even remember the crash test dummies.
Right.
But
I'm so old. I don't remember my 5th birthday. I don't think I really even got. I mean, I know I got like a Sega Genesis maybe for Christmas, but that was something me and my sister had to share. And
mhm.
um, gosh, yeah, didn't get a sword, didn't get a wand, maybe got a book.
If I did get a book, it definitely wasn't one that taught me magic. I think
Right?
it just
Yeah.
taught me the alphabet because
Right.
I'm a
Right.
fucking
Right.
kid. So
After the birthday kind of happens, they show Rudy kind of have some pretty harrowing nightmares from his past life, but they're also playing Guilty Gear Reload, so pretty big bonus there. I was a Guilty Gear kid, so like this being a show that has Guilty Gear like always kills me every time I see it, and it happens like 4 or 5 more times, and it fucking every
yeah,
time.
yeah.
I've put it in my notes that I would probably have beat the absolute brakes off of Rudy in Guilty Gear, just so everybody's aware. You get a lot of these moments with Rudy that are hard to experience because you see what he came from, and knowing your own self and knowing the experiences that you've had as like a young male in the United States of America growing up here. It's very, very different. Like growing up for me, fighting games weren't accepted at all. Like nobody fucking I would tell people like, "Hey, I'm going out of state," like as a 16-year-old, and they're like, "Oh, where are you going?" You're going to why are you leaving the state? What are you doing? What? And I'd be like, "Oh, I'm going down to Southern California to play in a tournament." And they're like, "For what?" Like, are you insane? You could die. And I'm like, "Yeah, I know, but like, video games are tight." It's like that experience to me is so different. And especially watching it like
15
here.
years too early because now it's you can get scholarships.
Oh yeah. League of Legends and
Yeah,
that kind
yeah.
of stuff.
You can get actual scholarships
Yeah.
playing video games. And back then, like video games were kind of like I don't want to say like taboo, but if you played video games, you're like, oh, you're a loser, go
Yeah.
do a real job. And now, like that stuff is almost celebrated.
Yeah.
When before we were on the, I guess, the cutting edge of gaming back then where people didn't understand it.
Yeah.
But now, like, it's kind of evolved where it's like an accepted pastime where
Mhm.
it's actually lucrative. You can make money, you can like get somewhere. When you played games in the past, it was kind of like you're wasting your life.
Yeah. And so you see his past, his experience, his nightmares, his almost evolution to here today. And then he starts talking to Roxy and he wants to see her cast sacred level magic. She casts that like crazy ass storm. The lightning absolutely fucking shreds that horse, dude. That horse was just vibing and then all of a sudden not vibing, having a bad vibe.
Yeah,
And
the
then,
horse is like tied to a tree and he's like,
yeah.
well, I'm going to die.
And then Roxy says, give it a try. You do that. And so he literally mimics the spell after 2 years of being trained by Roxy. And she's like, all right, that's it for me. I'm out. And so the second episode kind of closes with her leaving. And you didn't have that much time with this character, but you already kind of feel that connection with Roxy. And that's due to the fact that like this show has such good storytelling. Like you already feel like you're kind of a part of this family, like living vicariously through Rudy. I think they do a fantastic job. And I remember watching it and I'm like, I'm 2 episodes deep and I feel for these characters. That's good storytelling. And then it gets back into depravity territory in the beginning of episode 3.
Yeah, and again, this is another thing I can't relate to. I don't think I've ever stolen someone's panties and like put them over my face and ran around and was just like, this is the best time of my life.
I don't think that's no. And so Rudy gets his prized possession, and within milliseconds of him saying prized possession, I had wrote down it's probably panty. Rudy has stolen Roxy's panties and now prays to them. You get that depravity of it, and then he meets a child. He's out there just vibing. Some kids are picking on another kid, and you are introduced to a new character named Sylphie.
Yeah, and they're
And
picking on her in particular because she has green hair,
oh, that's right.
and Roxy said that the Superd are like the super bad demons, and if you
Mm-hmm.
ever see one, like run away, they're like super
They'll
dangerous.
eat your children.
Sylphie does have green hair, but it is a different shade, but that still kind of shows the ignorance of the different races and kind of
Yeah.
the racism that exists in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Rudy, having being bullied before, like understands like how that feels. So now that he actually has the power to stand up to bullies and to protect someone that has been in the same situation as him, he takes that chance to help somebody else out because he knows what that's like.
Right. And also, we get a couple moments of something that starts to be a reoccurring theme in this show that I think is one of the coolest uses of time we get to enjoy and we get to experience. And the intro in this show is not always an intro. Most of the time, it's not an intro at all. It's just a montage of what is happening in the world. Them either transitioning, like in transit to somewhere, something, that is still story related that needs to be said or shown, and it helps reestablish the world and give you context. And I think they do a really, really good job of that. And it starts here. And so you get some moments of everyone's favorite character, Paul, being an absolute fucking maniac, literally both of those words. And you're gonna get ready to be introduced into Rudy's little sibling as well. Dude, what was my note? Zenith, Paul, and Lilia gonna have a weird family. Yeah. Paul is the best and the worst at the same time. Again, total jock, literal penis attached or has hands attached somehow, walking around the world. Excellent sword fighter. Apparently both regards.
They're laying this foundation of how the world is now and how everyone is now.
Mm-hmm.
And as we get into these later episodes, it's not just Rudy growing. Like Paul will also, as an adult, be forced to grow, and everyone will be growing. So it's funny, it's kind of crazy and silly now. Paul's like, whoops, like infidelity. I had a child with another lady.
Oops.
Whoop. But yeah, like a lot of that actually comes back around like later in the season. And we do see Paul actually struggle, even though he's like the big bad sword swinging strong jock guy. He still does have his own weaknesses and his own demons that he kind of
his weaknesses are titties.
overcome as well. Oh yeah. Anything with boobs and he can use his other sword on.
Yeah. He's just weak to that. The little sisters, Aisha and Norn, born to Lilia and Zenith respectively, become part of the family, and you have this few moments where Rudy's like, wow, okay, I'm one, not an only child. Two, this shit's kind of crazy. I think he definitely is freaking out a little bit, but he's like kind of excited to almost help his dad out in the worst ways of like, yeah, it's chill. We're just going to have a big family. That was one of the things that was said when the infidelity first came up. And Zenith was like, I was about to fucking kill this guy.
Well, Rudy doesn't want to throw her out to the wolves because, it was basically just like, all right, well, since this happened, I can no longer be your maid. I don't know what I'm going to do with my life.
Right.
I'm going to be in a bad spot. And it wasn't necessarily, well, technically, it was Lilia's fault because she wanted some of that Paul D.
Yeah, she had been hearing about it through the fucking paper walls. And she was like,
every night.
Hell yeah. That sounds
so
fun.
It was her fault because she technically did seduce Paul, but Paul was also a piece of shit and just couldn't keep his wiener in his pants.
Yeah, and I can't imagine the amount of fucking mental stress of having to just 24 fucking 7 live for another family.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess I've never had one.
Right.
I've never been one. I don't know how that kind of life goes. But in the world that they're living in right now, I'm sure she gets paid well. I'm sure it's a job.
Yeah, but where does the money go? What does she do for fun? Yeah. She's literally only living for that family in her day-to-day life. If she were to like go to the store, or like if she wanted to go out to like go drink at the bar, at the end of the day, she is the gray rat's maid. Yeah. And so that's probably a different experience than being Lilia in our Earth. You know what I mean? So I feel like that's pretty hard to really judge their character on, because of the close proximity of it, because of the difficulty of the world they're living in.
But more or less, she seems to enjoy her job.
Yeah, and I mean, she enjoys Paul's junk too. So I mean, live life.
So she got something out of it.
The question that I had was, are they still sleeping together? Like after
I think
the
they
fact?
established like no, like after that, the Lilia Paul thing was an oopsie. Doesn't happen again in season 1. So I think they kind of like nipped that in the bud, and they're like, okay.
He says later on, Rudy's like, yo, but you're trying for a fourth, aren't you? And he's like, not for lack of trying. I don't know how we haven't had one, but it's not my fault. Like, at one point. So, like, he's obviously going to town on the town. But either way, so Paul has a little pep talk with Rudy and is like, hey, man, Sylphiette, you're going to meet a lot of girls. Don't tie yourself down. And you get to practice with women of the larger variety, which blew my fucking mind. That was a fucking sentence that somebody wrote and was like, yep, that's going in. You know what I mean? Like, I was just like, oh my God.
I mean, I appreciate it a little bit. That's a cool thing to, I guess, connect with your dad. Like,
I guess,
like,
I don't know.
Again, Paul, he's not good at a lot of things.
No, he's terrible at everything.
The only things he's good at is swinging a sword and swinging his dick.
Yeah.
So he's more or less doing his best to try to impart knowledge onto Rudy. The only knowledge that he knows.
Right.
So all he is just, like a sword swinging dude. So, this is all he has to, to help Rudy in his life, because nothing else
Rudy's out here. Really, he's like, I know about geometry. I know about trigonometry, and you know about the vaginology, vaginomics, as they say. You might be what they would call a vagician, as like
oh shit.
Yeah. So it's a whole different world for Rudy, our dog here. So they get that weird pep talk, birds and the bees kind of, in the fucking weirdest way. And then Roxy sends a letter, lets Rudy know that she's in Sharon, and she's got a worse pupil than Rudy ever could possibly be in the Sharonian prince, who's a little shitlord. And then Rudy gets the excitement to earn tuition. He wants to earn his way into get him and Sylphiette into college.
Mage college.
Yeah, mage
college.
And
that's the thing, too, because Rudy basically took Sylphie under his wing after he saved her from being bullied. She was like, oh, magic is so cool. Like, you can do all these crazy things, but I can't do anything. I'm basically useless. And Rudy was like, no, you're not useless. If you want to learn magic, let's learn magic together.
Right.
And then he was actually able to teach Sylphie how to do incantationless magic as well.
Creating that dynamic where, like, you breaking the boundaries of the world that they've established.
This is part of, like, the whole growth process of his old self to his new self, where now he's actually contributing. He's helping people out. He's teaching someone how to kind of, like, follow your dreams. And, know, if you're passionate about magic, you should chase that and you should do that. So he's doing a good job of encouraging Sylphie, but mage college ain't cheap. You got all those student loans and stuff, and no one's going to forgive him. So he's got to work for the money to basically send both.
He's got to work hard for the money. So hard
to send both of them to college. So Paul, in his infinite wisdom, has an idea and is like, okay, it's time to put you to work in the worst way possible.
Yeah.
Which is rip you from your entire family and just send you against your will.
Yeah, man. Being a 7-year-old in this realm is not looking good. He had just been introduced to his little sisters. He's seeing his family, and Paul's like, you know what's a really fucking good idea? You go hang out with my friend, Ghislaine, the giant-breasted beast woman, who...
that I've also banged. In the little chariot thing, it was alluded to that Paul has definitely slain the beast with his second sword.
Okay. But I more was worried about the work and Rudy being a fucking perv. And also the lack of clothing Ghislaine is wearing. Because, like, you can't have a character wear normal clothing if they're a beast woman, apparently.
I mean, I understand it because she's the sword king.
Yeah, she's so mobile. They're restricted.
Yeah, all those clothes inhibit mobility. You need to be able to...
Sweatpants don't exist anywhere but our Earth, guys, okay?
Yeah.
So importantly, remember to keep your breasts exposed to swords. Anyways, we get the end of episode 4. Ghislaine is introduced. The beginning of episode 5, Rudy is on his way to what we will later know as Fatoa. Paul forbids Rudy from sending letters or coming back for 5 years, and is told to teach and train others until he's allowed to come back, because Paul is a fucking moron and a terrible parent. These are my words. And Sylphiette is apparently the reason Paul doesn't want Rudy to stifle his own growth on account of Sylphiette. Very weird way to go about it. Again, Paul thinking dick first, and
it does make sense, but the way Paul executed the plan was
he
terrible.
Explains 0 things to Rudy, throws him in a chariot with this beast woman, and is like, get the fuck out of here and go work, you dumb idiot. And then tells the viewer these things. These are the reasonings the viewer sees. And so you get introduced to the other side of the gray rats, or one of the other of the 4 total sides of the gray rats. So you get introduced to Philip, who is Eris's dad, and you have Philip, Paul's cousin. That's right. The mayor of the city that they are going to now train Eris in. Eris Grey Rat with redhead, very fiery, very angry, very punchy all the time. Hilda. What was my description of Hilda? Philip's wife and turbo cunt. Got it.
All accurate so far.
All accurate so far. Yeah, so Philip asks Rudy to train his daughter for 5 years to pay for the tuition to get into the School of Magic for him and Sylphia. Eris, in the establishing moments, seems untrainable and insane. She is like the definition of the spoiled brat. Everybody kind of caters to her, and she just does literally whatever she wants and will fucking murder you if she doesn't get what she wants. Rudy comes up with the dumbest fucking idea, because that's like the thing that Rudy does in trying to get her to want to learn magic. Greg, what was your feeling on this escape room idea? Like,
obviously it's a terrible idea.
Yeah.
And again, this is Rudy like not having any experience in social situations, right? Like the idea was very extreme. I feel like you could have executed this in a different way and gotten the same result. But again, I think for the world building, they did this to kind of show that Eris wasn't held in the highest regard because she was such a problem child.
Right.
I guess the help, right? The butlers of the gray rats and everything like that. She was just a terror, and they're like, this is the worst. I have to cater to this girl. So then they did the whole escape room thing, but it ended up being an actual real kidnapping. So they faked a kidnapping, but in reality it was a real kidnapping.
Some fucking like Home Alone or whatever shit. It's fucking insane.
Yeah, so
my notes say Rudy sets up an escape room. This is gonna go super well. Next note, oops, it's all fucked up. The robbers, the kidnappers, come into the room, and Rudy does not know that they are not on board with the information of that this is fake and this is supposed to be super chill. And he is like hands up, winking at this dude non-fucking stop, and it killed me. I started laughing out loud so hard because Rudy with the one eye fucking winking, and this guy's just like, no, dude, we're gonna sell you guys. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? And then this dude, he socks Rudy in the face, knocks him against the wall, right? And he's like, wow, that was really real. I didn't think he needed to go that far. And then proceeds to American History X curb stomp Eris's fucking face in. And that was like the first real like moment we've gotten of like actual gore, so to speak, because like you saw the horse get lightninged, and then you see Eris get fucking raffle stomped, and her teeth are on the floor.
The world building contrast thing in the growth of Eris as a character as well, because she's been pampered her whole life. So
Yeah.
this is the first time she's ever been in a situation where her grandpa or her dad can't just like literally bail her out
right
immediately.
This kidnapping is going really bad, but Rudy ends up kind of catching wind of what's going on, kind of saving the day a little bit. They get to an alleyway where they were kind of able to escape, and they're surrounded. Rudy is kind of confronted with a little bit of his own mortality, with not just being able to knock people out with the spells that he has so far. He fights his first opponent that actually stands a chance, that isn't one of his parents that gives a shit about him, you know?
Like, Rudy is set up as like a genius, like genius spellcaster. He's doing all this crazy shit, incantationless magic. But even being as genius and powerful as Rudy is, he's still at a disadvantage here. And
scared.
And the mercenary guy that attacked him was using whatever, like the Viking style of swordsmanship.
North God style.
And Rudy's able to identify it because of his training with Paul. So even though he lived in this cush world where he was kind of set up as like super smart kid, you're going to go out there and be somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Even with all of his power, he still isn't able to get out of this situation. They almost die.
Mm-hmm.
And Rudy, is basically like, well, there goes my second chance. So, like, I died once. I guess I'm just going to die again.
Going again.
Yeah, even with all my power and stuff, I'm still not able to, like, put it on cruise control and just cast magic.
Right. Having this inner monologue while this sword is flying at his face from this dude that has, like, knocked his magic to the side. He was shooting fireballs, he's fucking people up, and this dude's just, like, bouncing it off his sword, and then throws his sword at him, at Rudy, while Rudy is in the air. There's nowhere for Rudy to go, holding on to Eris, and he's about to get fucking wrecked. And then you see Ghislaine first step onto the scene like an absolute fucking savage, and leaps down from the building in an instant, and does that. This is like the first establishment of like time dilation of any sort in like a real battle. And Ghislaine absolutely fucking obliterates these dudes in like the coolest fucking way.
You get to see the actual power of a Sword King in action.
Yeah.
How ridiculous it is.
Right.
But yeah, so Ghislaine jumps down, just
explodes the sword in the air, and chops that dude's head off in like the same instant. Like, it's crazy. It's sick as fuck. I love it.
Ghislaine's my favorite character. She comes and saves the day, and they all kind of sit down and realize, wow, we got fucked up.
Yeah.
And then, they uncover the plot where they were actually trying to kidnap Eris, and then Philip is like, all right, well, I'm going to send you to go die somewhere. Butler guy that set this up.
Yeah.
And then that guy, you'll never see him again.
Nope.
But then Eris realizes, oh, hey, like magic is actually like really useful. That what Rudy did was like pretty amazing. And even though Ghislaine was the one that ended up saving everyone, she did realize the value of magic at that point during this whole thing. So even though, it was a fucked up escape room, it did work because Eris now had a re-energized opinion on magic and teaching, and realized, if I want to be able to do cool stuff like Ghislaine and cool stuff like Rudy, I'm going to have to work hard and study and be able to do all this stuff. So again, with the theme of growth, even though it was hard for Eris to kind of get over that hurdle, she herself made that decision that it's like, okay, stop being comfortable, stop having like dad do everything for me,
she got
stop
Inception.
being weighted on hand and foot, and really accept this challenge and learn. And it is still a challenge. She still does have the fire in her, and she still doesn't want to study and doesn't want to do all this stuff.
Of course.
But she does push through and grows better as a person and learns to do things that she was never able to do.
Yeah. Another thing, there's a moment where you kind of see Rudy have to face mortality again. We talk about how he's fearful that he's going to die again. But after Ghislaine saves them, he had his ears covered and he's looking at this dude who got his head completely chopped off, and he is just literally gushing blood on the ground right in front of Rudy, right at his feet. The fear and the shock that he's probably feeling in this moment is pretty, like, it's a pretty traumatizing experience no matter what. And Eris is just like, oh shit, Ghislaine saved us. Hell yeah, cool, thanks. Jumps up, goes to Ghislaine. Whereas Rudy is still sitting there on the ground in shock. And you kind of get this establishment of like, Rudy isn't always going to be the smartest person in the room when it comes to what to do in terrible situations like this. He does good, but it's not successful. He's going to do just enough so that everything turns out like somewhat okay. And that's not going to be good enough in the future. So you have Eris finally saying, okay, let's do this. I'll learn some magic. I'll learn some sword fighting. Let's fucking get it over with so I can do cool shit. And that's kind of the end of episode 5. We get into episode 6. And man, again, we get back to it where there's like a little political intrigue and then there's a little bit of perviness. And I'm just like, hey, you could have just kept us with the political intrigue here, guys. Like, I'm interested. I'm here. I don't need Rudy being a creep about titties. Okay. So
yeah, we basically learned that all of the males in the gray rat family all love boobs.
They're
constantly.
big fans of boning and boobs. But like, you also get Philip kind of explains the differences in a lot of the families. I think it's either this episode or episode 7. I wrote them down. It's actually episode 8 that you learn more about the gray rat family. So we'll save that for that. But they're in Roa. That's the city they're in. This is still all central continent. And I like, to me, like world building, I want to see what the world looks like, see what like the continents look like. And so like I looked up a map at this point and I had no frame of reference because on the left side you have the Ashura region or the central continent, and you have some other continents as well. And they show, okay, this is happening in a very small section of the world. And I thought it was like you look at it, it's like the size of America, right? But they're all in like Oregon is basically what it is. So it's a very small region of where all of this is happening. You get introduced to Saurus, Eris's grandpa, who's fucking awesome. He's just screaming all the time. He's the weirdest leader of the gray rat family. Like, you get all these characters in this beginning of political intrigue. You get Eris and Ghislaine learning magic from Rudy. And I feel like this episode is another one of those world building episodes where it's just like establishing so much about who Rudy is in the world and what he's going to bring to the world. And it's mostly going to be about teaching, because I feel like over the last few episodes, you just see Rudy like freeze in these moments, and the people that he's taught or the people that he's interacted with are the people that actually make the firm decisions.
It's like the big thing about growth where, you know, Rudy thinks he's like at a certain level and then he realizes he's not, and he has to still continue. Like, he's what, like fucking 10 at this point? So it's still this whole growth story of Rudy being like a crazy, amazing mage, but he still has room to grow. He still has things he needs to learn. There's still things about the world that he knows nothing about.
Mm-hmm.
Gray rats are crazy. Rudy continues the teaching for Eris, and Ghislaine also gets in on this as well. So Ghislaine doesn't know how to use magic either.
Doesn't know how to read either.
She doesn't know how to read. She doesn't know how to write. She doesn't know how to do math. She doesn't know how to do anything. She's kind of like a female Paul. She just swings her sword around and just blows shit up.
Yeah.
But Eris is growing. Rudy is growing as a teacher because he has to use a different teaching method with Eris than he does with Ghislaine, because Eris, she just wants to go do other things. He learns it's like, okay, there needs to be a reward afterwards, because they went shopping and they went out on the town and they did all sorts of stuff. Ghislaine is obviously older and wiser, and Ghislaine, I think, understands the importance of learning all of this stuff and doesn't necessarily need to be like rewarded for it. Like, the reward is her getting better as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's cool too, because Rudy is able to show Ghislaine things that she's never learned before. So all of these characters, every single one so far that has been introduced, is learning something new, and they're all learning it from each other and learning together. And everyone in the story is on this path of growth, and that's why we just keep bringing it up, is because this is the underlying theme of the anime. I think is just this growth. There's like ups and downs in growth where
Mm-hmm.
you learn cool stuff, but then also it's difficult, and you have to put in the work, and you have to do the shit you don't want to do to get to the thing that you ultimately want in the end.
Yeah.
So I really like that interaction because I already thought Ghislaine was sick as fuck.
Yeah.
But now I think Ghislaine is even more sick because she's putting in that time to like learn basic math and be able to calculate currency, and not just throw like $100 on the table when she's buying a bottle of water and then just walking away because she has no idea how to do math.
Right. Right.
So
I think they do a great job in this episode of giving that character more. You see Ghislaine as this powerhouse of a character, and the vulnerability of not having basic intelligence, or what is viewed as probably basic intelligence, reading, writing, math, any of that. And you have this character that's like obviously like had to sit there and be like, okay, I probably should not know fucking math at this point. Like, I'll learn it, and for the sake of Eris, I'll learn it as well. And then they start talking about the world a little bit more again at the end. They're talking about the Perugius, the flying fortress, and they talk about something they touched on in episode 2. They talk about Lapis, just a very, very small amount, that there was a war. And then they talk about a little bit more about the war between Perugius and Lapis. Lapis was the leader of this demon group, and Perugius was him and his 12 servants went to this place where Lapis was. They had this big fight, big war, and Perugius defeated Lapis. And now apparently it's some sort of prison to a certain extent. You get a little more of the power scaling. Like, these are fables told to kids. This is stuff that's happened years and years ago. But obviously it's an anime. This has some semblance of realism to this world. And I think I love stuff like this. Like, they've given you a power scale, and they've shown you that they will break it, and that they will show you there are massive differences. Even when they talk about another power scale later on, they establish that there is a lot of movement in it. And that to me tells me that hard work is something that's important here in this world. And a lot of like, I don't like growing up in the United States, like it seems like a lot of what people weighed things on was talent, and hard work was less of what was shown to be cool. Like, Michael Jordan was this incredible talent, and it wasn't the hard work that got him there. He was just so skilled, and so he had such a great game sense beyond. And then later on in life, you get the more establishment of like what he fucking went through to be Michael Jordan. Kobe Bryant, prime example. How hard Kobe Bryant worked at all times. I just watched a bunch of basketball. That's why I'm establishing this as a basketball reference.
Yeah, us as a society we're focused on the cool stuff. We're not focused on like how you got there to do the cool stuff. And I think things almost like social media and that sort of thing are almost exacerbating that mindset, because you hop on Instagram or YouTube shorts and you see either like people dancing or people doing something like super crazy, or someone singing, and you're like, man, that like, oh, they're so good at singing, I want to sing like that.
Right.
And they're not necessarily showing the path it took to actually get there. They're just showing the end product. And I think it's really important to show the actual hard work. And I think maybe we're doing a little bit better at that, because now Netflix has a lot of documentaries on Michael Jordan and Kobe and all that stuff. And, they're kind of diving in a little bit deeper on what it took to actually get there, what they had to go through, what their practice was like, what their upbringing was like. It's not like Michael Jordan was living in the lap of luxury and just one day decided to play basketball and then just threw $1 billion at basketball and then got good.
Yeah.
That's not like how it actually came to be.
Right.
So that's why I like this anime a lot, because it does show the hard work that you have to put into to get to the point of where you are
Mhm.
the basketball superstar with your own Nike shoes and
Celebrating hard
everything.
work is so much cooler to me than what we've been shown in a lot of our recent history.
Rudy's kind of in that same boat because
Right.
he had a pretty good upbringing. Like, his parents could afford a live-in tutor, they
Right.
could
And
afford
it
all this
happened
stuff.
twice.
But that's why I think it's cool, is because Rudy, even with all this stuff and with his own magic talent,
Mhm.
he's still not some powerhouse just blasting people with magic and, walking away and being like, that was easy.
Right.
Like, he still has to go through all of the hard work stuff and learn all of the other things, and just throwing, rocks and fireballs and water lasers at people doesn't always work. Like, you have to continue to be like dynamic, and you have to continue to learn and
Mhm.
apply your skills differently. So that's why this anime, I think, is such a good, like, it's like a refreshing series where it's not just
Eminence and
people
Shadow.
punching through walls. Yeah. Like, just going atomic. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's winter in the six-sided world. That's what it's called. And we've got the montage in the beginning of the episode of Rudy training Ghislaine and Eris more in magic. They're going through a lot of what we talked about before, with the awesome intros and cool stuff actually happening in the world, like shown through an intro instead of just the same old bullshit, which, of course we both love. So this is right before one of the major things. Did you see this coming, Greg? Did you see like this major, like the shakeup ended up happening the way it did at all?
No, I didn't see this coming at all. It happened before, I think. So this isn't like the first time it's happened. Like, there's been other instances of the.
We're going through everything spoilers wise, so we can call it the
Yeah,
mana
yeah, yeah.
disaster, right?
They did mention it before. I can't remember exactly in the timeline, like when the last one happened, but it's not foreign concept
Right.
to the citizens of the world.
Right.
As a viewer, I didn't expect that to happen.
Right. I was sitting there and I'm watching and I'm like, you know, we're going through, they kind of have towards the end of this episode, they had like oh, there's a red orb in the sky. I wonder what that is. But it leads into what becomes the mana disaster. But I am sitting here watching the show and everything's just kind of delightful. Roxy sends a message to Rudy in Fatoa. Everybody's kind of vibing, just hanging out, enjoying life, teaching each other, hanging out, trying to grab boobs, doing the same old thing, you know?
Mm.
Oh yeah, Rudy sells the statue, and it's made its way to Roxy, and she notices that it's a fucked up statue. Not that it's made very well. It's got a great design, no flaws, but a little creepy. We get kind of almost what you would call filler, but I think it's more than filler in a story like this. It's more like a false sense of security. Like,
Yeah.
something has to happen soon. We're not just watching a story about nothing. So I think they do a really good job of being able to do that in this show more than any other show I've really watched. Like, again, because the slow pacing.
It does have like a good ebb and flow, because throwback to the beginning of the series, you had, Rudy being a baby, having kind of like a sheltered life, and, hanging out with Sylphette, and his life is going great, nice peaceful village in the countryside. And then it gets shaken up because now Paul just throws him in a carriage, and it's just like, go out there and be somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And then Rudy now has to challenge himself in life, and that was like kind of the first shakeup. And then it kind of, flows back, and then it's like, okay, now we're just kind of adventuring, things are good, people are learning, like, he's now comfortable in his new setting.
Mm-hmm.
And then now we have to be like, all right, time to mix things up again.
Mm-hmm.
And the show does like a really good job of that, where it builds it up and then it comes back down, and then we kind of have the downtime. Rudy learning the demon language,
Oh
um,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and then it swings back up where now we have like a keystone event that happens, and now no one knows what's going on. Everyone has to kind of figure it out, and all of the stuff that they learned before, they have to apply to this brand new situation that they're in
Mm-hmm.
and figure out how are they going to make their way back to their own land, because they didn't get teleported to a different world. They just basically got teleported like across the current world.
Mm-hmm.
So they figured out where they were, and now they're like, okay, let's use what we've learned and figure out how to get back.
Yeah. And during the process, right before the mana disaster happens, you get introduced to some characters in episode 8. We kind of skip over episode 7 because there's not a lot going on, but the storyline development and, character connection. Whereas episode 8, you have Rudy's birthday. Rudy turns 10 years old. Eris is now 12. Rudy hasn't really seen his family in several years. Probably pretty uncomfortable, thinking that his family was going to actually show up and be there for him, and they weren't at all. They had their own obligations and stuff was happening there. Eris gives him a very, very expensive staff called Aquahartia. You have all of Rudy's extended family welcoming him into the family, but saying like, hey, we can't really show you off, unfortunately, because that's the nature of what this is. There's the different gray rats, and you're here, and the Notos gray rats are not exactly like super loved right. So just so you know. And you get this whole like almost like he's that stepchild or like the best friend of the family that like becomes the brother, you know what I mean? Like where this extended family really truly cares for him after all he's done for them to teach Eris to not be a fucking psychopath and to keep the family like his thought process of like making sure that nothing goes wrong under his watch, I guess, under his tutelage, where he's just being a good person all around. And so they, you finally see like more people, because he didn't have that in his normal life. He was just like, obviously we've talked about him being a scumlord and kind of like shutting himself away from the world. This is the first time he's actually on his own merit become a part of someone's family.
And Hilda has a nice change of heart, because she was always the cold stepmother that is just like, you're no son of mine.
Right.
But yeah, she has a nice change of heart, and just smothers
good
him
thing,
in
because
a nice motherly smother.
Right, because nothing bad happens to her after this. So Rudy's crafted statues. Sylphie's visiting the family. One of my notes of Aisha, the daughter of Lilia, dressing up as a maid at 4 years old, or yeah, like what the fuck, dude? Come on now.
Oh, it's nice. She's following in her mother's footsteps.
Shut the fuck up, Greg. Don't you dare.
What do you mean? It's nice. It's kind of like Paul and Rudy, right? Paul passed down.
Yeah, totally.
And now
Yep.
Lilia's passed down, maid.
All of what you're saying is really, really smart, Greg. Anyways, and we're first introduced to a white-haired character who we later find out is a character named Orsted. So I'll probably say Orsted a few times. I just want to make sure that everybody knows that I'm talking about Orsted here. This dude shows up. You see a bunch of red dragons, and you're like, so this guy's a fucking savage, right? Because we haven't seen dragons before. This dude's already taming them, apparently, because he's a badass. They kind of like weirdly rapid fire introduce a couple other characters, because they talk about Lapis a little bit. They talked about Perugius the episode before. Kishirika? Is that what it is?
And she's a cool character.
I hate her,
it's kind of,
but that's fine.
Well, like she's kind of like the chaos, the chaos character that
I don't hate her now in the current, like what I know about the show. I hated her when I saw her for the first time. I was like, this character's already annoying as shit, and I'm not about it. So, but you're introduced to these few characters. It's weird because like once you start hearing the name Lapis more often, and you haven't really like in season 1, you don't really get that with Perugius. You get it more with Lapis because you go to the demon continent. The mana disaster happens pretty much at the end of the episode, right? Yeah. Almonfi, the Fox Mask guy who seems like a complete fucking psychopath badass, fights Ghislaine. and then the mana disaster happens, and you catch a glimpse of Perugius in the fortress, or so you think it's Perugius. I don't imagine it is. And then you get the mana disaster. Rudy starts to run, realizes what he's doing, and then turns around to save or try and save Eris, which I think is like awesome. The way they did that, good. Don't make him a fucking bumbling psychopath. But also it shows something that I think is cool, because later on they show like Paul is holding Norn and Lilia is holding Aisha, and both of them get teleported to the same place. So I imagine if you're holding on to somebody in this mana disaster, you get teleported to the same place. But Orsted seems to be, I don't know, like so insanely strong. And we don't really get a gauge on that till later. But they get sent to the demon continent, and right as they're in the beginning of episode 9, you're gifted with the warning of Roxy coming true. You're gifted the, hey, this guy has green hair, he's got the gem in his head. He's probably super evil. Oh, I didn't even notice in episode 9 they mentioned the wicked dragon god,
which is Orsted.
Right.
He does end up, he is the wicked dragon god. But yeah, as you were saying, they get teleported to the demon continent.
Oh,
Rudy does have,
he has the vision with the man god.
Yes. Mm-hmm. The god of men.
Yeah, that's, I mean, you go ahead and talk about the man god.
He seems like a goofy guy, like someone you would see on a variety show.
I literally, so what I've said so far about the man god is later on you meet another character named Geese that is like the total comic relief of the normal human area, and I'm just assuming that that is man god's connection to the world is Geese. Either he is Geese or he looks through the world through Geese's eyes, because he's just like a fucking goofball. And the man god's just like, yeah, man, just listen to me. Everything's gonna be super good. Listen to the guy that you're hanging out with over there. He'll probably help you out. But if you don't, I don't know. Shit might suck. Who knows? And just like kind of is like super goofy and like over exaggerated movements. The man god just kills me every time I fucking see him on screen. I'm just like, dude, this guy's fucking out of it.
I like how he's just like, all right, Rudy, yeah, just, listen to what I have to say. And then Rudy's is like, oh, I don't know if I'll believe you. Then he's like, see you later.
Yeah, bye.
he's just out of there.
Yeah. See ya. Thanks for that. And you're just like, what the fuck, bro? Like, it just blows my mind. The character that they've created with the man god or the human god is just great. I love it. I'm a fan. He also, during this time, is in his previous form. Whenever he speaks to the man god, Rudy is back to being his normal old world self. And he talks about how he didn't want to be in that body ever again, didn't want to see that body ever again, and thought he had gone past it. And that's such a terrifying mental block, I imagine. Like in our normal world, say you lost weight and that was like, you're so proud of yourself, and then you have a nightmare of just you being who you were, or you were like got in a car accident or something. Having that PTSD of who you once were is such a terrifying prospect, especially in this world where he's given a second chance to live the way that he wanted to. It's insane, and it's really sad to see him experience that the way that he does, because it's so abrupt. There's nothing that happens that's like, he gets the mana disaster, of course. Like after the mana disaster, he's just kind of taking a nap. He didn't really know what happened, and then he's sitting in front of a Rudyard, who is the Superd, like the one that Roxy explains, and then bam, back in man god territory, being my old self. Damn.
That's the one thing I was kind of like disappointed in Rudy as a character, because I understand what you're saying, where you did all this work and then you come back, mm-hmm. and then you're pretty much back at step one, or like, in the position that you never wanted to be in again.
Right.
And you bring up the car accident thing. Like if you get into a car accident you break both your legs, and then you wake up in the hospital, and they're like, "All right, time to learn how to walk again."
Right.
It's kind of the same thing. But at the same time, kind of hoping he would be a little, I don't want to be like say encouraged, but not so depressed about it, because even if it did end up where if it was all a dream, he got mana disastered and then he was just teleported back to his old body.
Yeah.
Me internally, I was just hoping he would be able to take all of the growth he's done, all of the lessons he's learned, and even though yes, he has to start back in his old body, he already has the knowledge and the experiences, and then he would be able to apply it to his old self and then
Right.
make his old self how he wants it, versus him and Rudy almost being like two people with the same mind.
Yeah, and that's always a thing that I worry about when you look at this. Like, of course, with the abrupt nature of how fast all of this happens to Rudy, like he's now spent 10 years in this new body, creating this new life and these new experiences, and then 10 years after he's sitting there in a mana disaster, he lays down and some dude is talking to him and he looks down and it's his old body that he hadn't seen or really even thought about in 10 years.
And he's naked. I don't know why he's naked.
Yeah, well, I mean,
he's completely naked.
Yeah, butt ass naked. I cannot, the fear I would have of like the same thing that Rudy goes through. He's like, dude, am I just dead? Like what? Like I just tried so hard for so long, all for this. Like that's got to be, it's a terrifying experience. So I think they do a good job at least. And yeah, like no matter what, as hard as you work for 10 straight years, like you're gonna get fucking sad when you're like, that's all gone. Bummer. Nah, restarting. Cool. It's just So you've got Eris and Rudy sitting in front of Rujerd, the Superd, which is just a great mouthful.
Yeah.
And they're on the demon continent. He seems pretty cool. He seems like a cool guy. He's just like, hey, I saw you guys, helped you out, and that's about it. And then Rudy's not scared of him, which we come later to understand is a pretty important thing, because this whole fear that has circulated with the Superds since the war 500 years ago between Laplas and Perugias, Superds have been absolutely shunned in society, and wherever they go, everybody says like death is following them. They'll eat kids in their sleep, if they don't go to sleep on the right time, like total wives' tales of these people. And you meet this guy and he's just awesome from the get-go, and he's like, look, I'm on the side of justice. I want what's right for people and I want to do the best I can.
When they do both wake up, Rudy and Eris, like kind of the prejudices they were taught when they were younger do surface, and they're just like, oh shit, like I'm faced with this race of people that all we've been told our entire lives is they're ruthless killers. All they do is destroy, and you should avoid them at all costs. So it is nice to see Rudy and like Eris to an extent too. Like, yeah, she was scared, but she wasn't, too crazy. Right?
Yeah.
Like, she was stunned. But it is nice to see two characters be able to use their fucking brains and be like, all right, like he doesn't seem too bad.
Yeah.
He seems like a decent guy. He did help us out. Like if he wanted to kill us, like
he would have done it 15 times.
We were passed out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's nice for them to like use some critical thinking here and be like, okay, maybe the stuff that was said before may not be as bad as everyone made it seem. As the viewer too, as you're introduced to Rouger, it is kind of one of those things where, yeah, maybe things aren't as they seem. There's more than meets the eye here.
He is a transformer.
There's maybe there's a little bit more to this race of people, and maybe they have their own story that hasn't been told yet.
Right.
So it does have that mystique behind it, and piques the curiosity.
Yeah. And with Ruijerd talking at the campfire and letting them know, like, hey, like, look, I get it. I'm trying to change the way that people view Superds all over the world. It's very hard, but I'm just trying. And the reason that this all happened was because of Laplace. Laplace screwed us over. He betrayed all of us. And then you have the understanding of like why the Superd are the way that they are and what happened to them, even in a little bit.
There is some truth behind the Superd stuff though, because when they do fight the giant sea turtle, you do get to see the power of the Superd and Ruijerd himself. And you can see how it's like, yeah, these guys are pretty ferocious. And if you did have to fight them, chances of survival are
pretty
very
slim.
low.
Yeah.
If you did have a war with them, it's going to be not a lot of people surviving.
Right. And if they really did need to eat babies, I mean, they have the jaw strength from what it seems like by how strong Ruijerd is. He could eat a baby or two. I mean, maybe three. Who knows?
Yeah, he could have the full 10-course meal of baby if
he really wanted to. Yeah. So you meet this character and you get the impression, you're like, okay, all right, gonna give him the benefit of the doubt, just like Rudy and Eris are doing. No judgment zone here. This world is already racist enough. Can we fucking stop? So you get the info about Laplace. Laplace betrays the Superds. Laplace was a hero to the demons and unified a lot of the races of demons and won the rights of demons from humans. We've seen this storyline quite a bit when it comes to like the orcs in like World of Warcraft or something like that. You know what I mean? We've seen this storyline in certain ways. And I think they do a really good job of telling it here. Again, I think that the storytelling in season 1 of Jobless is stellar. Every time they give you a little bit, they give you like a tasty morsel, and then they continue on. So I was confused about this, and maybe you can clarify this, Greg. The Superd were offered spears, and they already had their souls in their spears, correct? And then the spears they were offered doesn't make them soulless, but they were different souls. I assumed.
Yes, because Ruijerd does say the spear that he is wielding currently is his son. So he's swinging his son around.
Yeah.
When he's fighting.
Yes. And I assume that has some like reference to their own durability with the spears as well. If you imbue a soul into a spear, I'm gonna imagine it's probably a little bit better than your standard iron sword. You know what I mean? Thank you, friends, for checking out the Anime Book Club podcast. We hope you enjoyed the episode.
And if you don't want to miss the next one, follow us on the socials where we announce new episodes, content, and other cool stuff. You can also check out our anime list with our rankings and follow along with what we're currently watching and what we have watched in the past.
All the links are in the description. See you in the next one. Bye!